So after that, I'm pleased to welcome Leisel to introduce yourself, and then I will follow the alphabetical order to the other panelists with us today. So Leisel, the mic is yours.
Great, thank you so much for having us, Sarah. I want to first say thank you so much to you and to Luis and to Bússola Tech for organizing this panel and for inviting me to join you. I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. My background in Congress began in 2019. I was a Congressional Innovation Fellow with Tech Congress. And then in 2020, in response to the pandemic, I helped launch the Congressional Digital Service Pilot Fellowship, which was a test fellowship that was hosted by the Select Committee, House Committee on Modernization. And we were really fortunate to get to work with one of my fellow panelists here. So, and I'm currently working on another project related to Congress and modernization, and look forward to this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Ananda, I see that you are online. Please, the floor is yours to your introduction.
Hello, and yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Ananda. I also started on the Hill back in 2019, working for a member of Congress, Congressman Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. I was there for 2 years. I then joined the House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress for 2 years, doing policy work and member services. And I now work for the new House Digital Service as a member services liaison, building new technology for Congress. I also run a staff association called the Modernization Staff Association that I founded 3 years ago. And we focus on modernization efforts that particularly affect junior staffers on Capitol Hill. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ananda. Rocío?
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very glad to have this panel of very interesting women. I'm a Mexican lawyer, but I have lived in Chile a lot of times, so I consider myself a Chilemex. I am fortunate to work as an advisor for the bicameral group of transparency of the Congress of Chile since 2012, the first time with UNDP and then as part of the Congress. And this group is very important because it's key to work all open parliament dimensions like participation, and it's integrated by senators and representatives, and being a bicameral Congress, this is very important to implement all the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rocío. Yaso? Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Correct. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Yaso Bala, Yaso for short. Hello from Australia. So nice to be in a virtual room with people from across the seas. Lovely. So I'm from NovaWorks. I'm a project officer. I've been with the company for 7 years, majority of my working life, really. And I've been a part of the group. I've seen new parliaments come on board. I've worked closely with the project team that helped make that transition happen, whether it's new tech or a new parliament or a new module for an existing parliament. And it's been quite a privilege, really, to work alongside those people. So Jonathan Rackett, mainly, to watch how he helps hold the customer's hand to get them across the line. And I've learned a lot from that. So I'm keen to see how other people do it and learn a few things from everyone else here.
Thank you, Yaso. And well, I am Sarah from Bússola Tech. I am Deputy Director at Bússola Tech, and I'm personally passionate about digital transformation technology. So it's once more a pleasure to have you all here today. And we will start our debate today, starting with a question for Ananda. We know that the legislative branch plays a critical role that impacts millions of people and organizations abroad. However, In today's fast-paced and constantly changing world, the process of managing change is highly important. In your opinion, Ananda, what are the most pressing challenges facing the legislative branch in terms of managing the process of change?
Thank you for that question. I thought about this a lot. Unfortunately, quite a few challenges came to mind, but I tried to narrow it down. So I think there are three things I want to talk about when it comes to managing the process of change. The first, and I'm sure this is a common issue that we all face, is just the cultural issue. I think that there's this sense that people don't always want to change, right? And I think it's a question we're going to get to a little bit later in this discussion as well, but there's different reasons for it. I think there's both staff and member attitudes that innovation isn't always a priority. There's kind of this belief that we shouldn't fix what isn't broken. We've been doing things, the same way for the last 10, 50, hundreds of years. And so instead of thinking about how do we make things better, people are focused on let's continue to, put our heads down, do the work, and just continue to, use these manual processes that might not make sense anymore. And that also is true for public opinion and perception. I think there's this view that the public doesn't really care about digital transformation and modernization, and so therefore it shouldn't be a priority. So just changing the attitudes around these issues is kind of the first barrier. The second is this internal and external pressure to move quickly and to try to follow through on promises, because I think people are often expecting us to fail. Citizens don't always have faith, right, that the federal government is going to serve them efficiently and effectively. And staff sometimes don't think that the internal offices on Capitol Hill are going to deliver on their promises. So there's this desire to prove them wrong, to move really quickly and to innovate fast and show, okay, we talked about, making these changes, so let's move quickly as possible to prove that we can do it. But then of course we don't want to end up building bad products or making changes that don't end up working. And so there's this constant tension between the two that is a challenge we have to deal with. And then finally, I think a lot of modernization initiatives haven't traditionally been institutionalized. So you see this both at the personal office level on Capitol Hill, where a chief of staff might do something really exciting and make changes in their personal office, but then they leave. The turnover here is really frequent. And then those changes go away and no one ever, it's not written down, they don't stick around. And so the changes leave with the people, with the staff. And then just in general, at the more institutional level, we're not always taking this iterative method of design. So there's a new initiative, a new member of Congress comes into power, or an entire new chamber of the House comes and tries to make changes. And then as soon as they leave, those changes leave with them again. Or at the leadership level, we've had some really interesting innovations with, offices have made applications for staff and members to use, but then they're owned by that leadership office. So they kind of die with the person who created them, and we don't always follow up on the innovations that we're working on. So that's my third one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. So to comment these questions, please, I would like to call Leisel.
I agree with everything that Ananda said. That tracks with my experience as well, but I would identify two other areas, or I guess maybe three areas. One is this issue of trust and building trust in an era when it's filled with politicization of issues, of traditionally non-political issues. For some, even the term modernization is political and partisan. So we have kind of hypertension between two parties in the U.S. Congress, anyway. And before I worked in Congress, I did a lot in foreign policy and technology, and a lot of the things that I worked on were based on building trust between parties. So when people are so separated, it's really difficult to get to a point of good faith effort between two parties and understand that they are working toward the same goal. And that is my second issue, which is getting folks on the same page, I think is a big challenge. It's a bit like, you have 535 individual offices and they all operate on their own terms, and you're kind of rallying, almost like herding cats in a way, and bringing everyone together to sort of achieve the same goal when there are lots of differences of opinion becomes a very difficult challenge when you're dealing with change. And then finally, I would say that having sort of inspired leadership and getting the right leadership in place is an enormous challenge, because if you have people who have a vision and can bring people alongside them in developing and actualizing that vision, it can be really, really effective. But if you don't have folks like that, things do not get done. So I would say that a lot of the modernization efforts that we were able to do with Congress, or that I've seen done really well in Congress, are often a result of inspired leadership who really take initiative, who have a vision and are willing to work toward completing that vision and building, the right type of team around them to get it done.
So thank you, Leisel. Rocío, would you like to comment this question too?
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with both my colleagues. The pandemic showed that at least the administrative staff in Chile gave a very fast answer in regards to technology and change. But we also saw a culture that, I don't know if this is a phrase in English, but it's a stone in the path, una piedra en el camino. Culture changes that are very difficult with many people. This happened also with transparency. At the beginning, the civil service didn't want to give the information because they thought that it was theirs. So all this modernization, if we want to go paperless, but they are used to use paper, and it's very difficult to break that thing that for us it's easy to change from a notebook, a computer notebook, from a paper notebook. No, so I believe that the culture, as Ananda said, is the stone on our path to make changes. And we also have to work with NGOs and the citizens, because we need their participations also to give the response that they are looking for. Many times we think of a new service between only the staff, but we know with open government and open parliament that that's not the answer, that we have to work together. So I think that's very important. The leadership also, and the good thing is that in Chile, at least, there are not so many changes. So that's a good thing for change.
Thank you, Rocío. Yaso, would you like to comment this question too?
Mm-hmm. Fascinating really to hear what it's like on the other side of the fence, because I'm in the tech company, and by the time we interact with our users, the people we speak to make things happen, they're already on board. So your perspective is the things that happen down the line. It's a project manager and their team and change management and trying to make all of that happen. So it's given me a little bit of insight into how things are like further down the track.
Thank you, Yaso. So I think we can move to the next question, but beforehand, we can compilate some ideas here, like culture, like having a operational leadership is a good thing. So the lessons here are really clear. So thank you for your collaborations in this question. So moving to the next question, starting with Leisel. Leisel, in terms of innovation in the legislative branch, legislative leaders plays a crucial role in this process, as we mentioned. So as they are responsible for setting the tone and create an environment that encourages creativity, risk-taking, and forward-thinking, how can legislative leaders foster a culture of innovation and change within their organizations?
Great, thank you so much. I think that there are a few ways they can do this. First of all, I think creating a culture that allows for experimentation is really important. Ananda talked about culture, but allowing people to iterate on ideas that they have, bring new ideas to the table, and having sort of an open environment where new ideas are welcomed and the opportunity to experiment and try new things are encouraged is really, really important. I think if leaders do that, it fosters a culture of innovation and change within the organization. I also think creating a culture and an environment where individuals are allowed to and encouraged to question not just the status quo, but also their assumptions is really important. A lot of the time, people will have an idea to change something, but there are embedded assumptions like, this is how it's always been, or we may not have interrogated an idea to the point of understanding why we have a certain protocol. For instance, I was at a tech company once, and when you go to the Hill, a lot of people would point out, oh, well, one part of Congress is not really utilizing the cloud. That would be more on the Senate side than the House side, but the House had, was a long journey to utilizing cloud computing technologies. And oftentimes it was sort of used as this example of like, oh, well, leadership hasn't seen the importance of this. They're not modernizing, they're not taking things forward, but there are actually constitutional reasons for why that was the case. And so being able to say, yes, we may want to move toward an environment or a computing environment that's more cloud-based, but we should also really understand why we're not at that state. It's not because people were, not thinking about it. It wasn't because leadership was just blind to the opportunities. Is that there are actual very good reasons for why that's there. And so to look at the assumptions, look at the status quo, and find out what the reasons are for why things may be the way they are is really important. And then finally, I would say that one key element to any sort of change effort within an organization is to identify your champions, the people who are already willing and ready to make changes and want to do new things. Ananda was actually that role for a variety of organizations. I mean, she was already taking the charge on the House side, and a number of people, when I started in the middle of the pandemic, said, you have to talk to Ananda because she's doing all this really interesting work. And so when you find people like her who are willing to move the conversation forward or willing to point out where things might be flawed and where they could be better and bring people alongside them, I think that really creates an environment where healthy and interesting, at least, change can occur.
Perfect. Thank you, Leisel. Rocío, do you want to comment on this question?
Well, I agree completely. And I think, well, diversity in the legislative Congress, because we have some MPs that love technology, for example, modernization, but there are a few of them. So we need a group that can handle this agenda and talk to the administrative and pressure them to change. So I think that's something very important, diversity. And I also, I don't know if you have this problem, but sometimes the staff has very good ideas and they implement them and they show it to the MPs and they don't use it. So this motivates the innovation of the staff. So maybe to try to build with the MPs to answer to the requests that they need, so they don't feel that it's something mandated by the staff, but created with the staff and themselves, something like that. might change a little bit this that I think happens in all the legislative powers.
Thank you, Rocío. Yaso, you want to comment on this question?
Yes, thank you. Could pick up could resonate with a few things that Leisel said. A good change agent and a reason why it's hard for them. You know, it could be beyond just a leadership or a preference to do things the old way. In my experience, from what I've seen here, it's getting really good change agents. People who've got a healthy appetite of respect and appreciation for Parliament's needs. For example, how this can be demonstrated is during the discovery process, the gap analysis process. You know, I sit in these sessions and I shadow my project manager and I watch how it's collaborative. It's tell us what you need or why you want it this way, or you want it. Is there another reason why you would prefer this to do this function? And I watch how Ben, which is my product manager, helps carry on that conversation, finds out he's got really good product knowledge. So I think that helps as well, having someone who really is familiar with how Parliament business is done and is able to bounce his experience and his knowledge of how things are done elsewhere with what the customer needs. And I think support is so key. Change, the word change is quite a disruptive element. You tell someone they've got to change the way they've been doing something for the last 10 years or even the last 1 year. I've just got it bedded down. Why do I need to swap? Even that in itself has a little bit of resistance. There is an emotional quantity to that. And people, for me, I find that the job, I'm going a little bit off topic here, but the job becomes enjoyable because the relationships are good. I know that sounds really basic and simple, but when that bond is there, it makes it easier to elicit information, to ask for things, to talk about things when they don't go well. So with my experience working with the customers that we have, the parliaments that we have, a good relationship, good communication really goes a long way to that.
Thank you, Yaso. Ananda, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, I think, you know, for when it comes to leadership, we have so many opportunities that the US Congress has. Every single office is a small business, right? We've got 10 to 20 people working for a single member, and they all have the opportunity to be creative and innovative within their own office. And I think that's a really key first step to changing the culture and mindset around innovation for the entire institution. So I just think there's a lot more freedom and creativity offices could be taking when it comes to their own practices, just taking in, you know, private sector project management practices or updating their basic technology, encouraging their members of Congress to use, you know, the latest iPhone instead of doing everything on paper. So you're not reading these stories in the press about how antiquated Congress is, right? I mean, just small, simple steps like that can change the entire culture and are easy ways to show kind of leadership in this area. And then I also think, you know, being able again to work across the aisle to tackle low-hanging fruit and really bring attention to these issues. You know, we are in a very partisan, polarized environment here in the US, but there's a lot of consensus on some of these issues. They're just not usually seen as the first priority. So the more that members of Congress are able to draw attention to these issues and to show to constituents, you know, that these issues do affect them, right? I mean, making Congress work better affects every single issue that Congress touches that affect millions of people, right? So being able to show that link for why it affects constituents and how it matters is, I think, a way that leaders can use their voices to make a difference in this area.
Yeah, it's interesting that all the answers has at least 3 points in common that are communication, collaboration, and also support that we can join with support and collaboration. So it's interesting to see that in different regions, in different houses, these 3 words equal in your answers, for example. So we are going to the 3rd round right now, and I would like to start with Rocío. We know that parliaments can use technology to improve their operations and increase efficiency with preserving traditional practices. Also, the institution can promote a culture of innovation by encouraging members to propose new ideas and initiatives. By embracing both continuity and innovation, parliaments can remain relevant and effective in meeting the needs of the society and its own needs. So considering that, how can parliaments balance the need for continuity and stability with the need for innovation and driving change in their operations, their daily operations, for example, also?
Well, that's a very difficult question.
The 1 million question.
And I will return again with the COVID pandemic. It activated the digital transformation, I think, everywhere, and in the Chilean case. And some of the procedures, the new procedures to work, they were prepared by the staff because they were thinking of remote voting for MPs with sick leave or that were in pre and post natal leave. So these apps were there in someone, how you say, escritorio, desk, and no one used that. And well, the crisis came and prompted the acceleration of the digital transformation. And this is like with anti-corruption measures. You need a catastrophe to implement things. The same, I think, with technology, because people is, not all people, but some people are afraid of technology, again, of the change that this means. And many legislative powers, I think, have excellent IT staff that are also always thinking of innovation and new digital applications to make work easy for everyone, MPs and staff. And but they are so busy because they have to be looking to the website. They have to be looking at the streaming of commissions, of the session, helping staff and MPs with their work. So I think one of the things that we need more is time. We need time to innovate, because to innovate you have to think, and to think you need time. We have, for example, we thought that the virtual Congress was going to be done in 1 year. I think I worked with a very positive group because it took almost 2 years. And we have to have support of an external group for this. And we also needed some funds. So that's another thing, time and funds. And as I say, in our experience, there is a lot of pace of innovation, but time is crucial. Sometimes we meet at 8 p.m. to a meeting because we cannot meet earlier, and well, that's not good. And to change this, Parliament should have a digital strategy for the short, medium, and long term. Strategic planning that is part of the goals of the chamber that has that. So no one forgets that this is in the strategic plan and it's not going to be left in a desk. And we need political leadership also with a transversal political group. This is the example of the bicameral group that without them, their political willness we could not push all these new things that come from open parliament. So that is another thing that we need, the budget. And again, we have to work with collaboration with academia, the civil society and citizens, because sometimes the needs of citizens and civil society is different. For example, I don't have any idea of how to work with open data. I need a Tableau and sets where I can play. And many times we don't work with the citizens themselves. So that's, I think we should get to know our citizens. Another thing is the digital gap also is very important. The pandemic showed that many people didn't have access and that internet was not as good as we thought. And well, I think that's part of, I will finish here, and working with citizens and organizations also help us build trust. That's one of the issues that we hear here.
Thank you, Rocío. So I totally agree. For example, that's why Bússola organizes, for example, this kind of conference to exchange knowledge, to exchange experience. Because, for example, you mentioned Tableau. I love to work with Tableau, but now I'm used to use a more Google Data Studio, for example. So you gave me an insight about this kind of thing that we can build another debate, for example, to help the colleagues to exchange this kind of knowledge and sharing experience in their different houses. So Yaso would like to comment on this question.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. With the work that we do, I'm going to sound a bit cliche here, but there's 3 Ps: people, product, process. And I think change for us is a lot around the people. And best practices is, I come back to establishing that good relationship with people. And how we can do this is basic, simple things like following through on the things that we said we'll do. Ergo recording decisions, the simple difference of what it means to just keep the ball rolling and making sure people feel like they're heard, gives them confidence that we're listening and gets the project moving. And managing expectations. So as a software company, we have projects and we have our support side. And whenever a support, just as an example, whenever a support ticket comes in, it's putting ourselves in their position, knowing that you're actually waiting on communication or an update to know that here's the plan, here's what you can do in the interim, here's when you'll get a fix. Managing expectations, putting ourselves in their shoes and doing the right thing. And another one would also be communications. Yes, it sounds quite basic, quite simple, but all of these things help build a good relationship. And that's made the work that we do easy. It's made talking when things don't quite go well also easy, because the bond is already there and we've kept them updated, and it's quite easy to work through the current bump, understand that here's the bigger picture, we'll put steps in place to make sure we don't face this again the next time, and lessons learned across the way. So yes, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Yasu. So I have to agree, empowering people has an unprecedented power in the team. For example, when people can communicate, when people feel secure to make some mistakes sometimes, but we know that when we're trying to innovate, mistakes happen. So I totally agree with your answer too. So Ananda would like to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that you know, sometimes the institution will move slowly or inefficiently intentionally, and being able to recognize when that is or what the cause of the problem or the slowdown is really important. So I think, you know, when we're talking about balancing this need for continuity and stability, there's times that the system, you know, has checks and balances, where, you know, legislation moves slowly, for example, because there's supposed to be more opportunities for debate or for other members to contribute to the legislation or to the conversation. And so, you know, for that reason, making sure that you're talking to every group involved and doing the research and really digging into that question of, you know, is this an intentional design that's making this process move slowly, or is this just, this is the way we've been doing it and there's not a real reason for it, and so maybe we can, you know, innovate and make that change. So I think that's really important. And then it is a real concern. I mean, there are certain, you know, traditions that should be upheld, or systems that, again, are put in place for a reason that I think we should follow. But I also think it's important to mention that on this debate about, you know, innovation, like continuity versus stability, I think we generally are always on the side of stability, right? And I have a lot of examples of times that where we've been on the spectrum of not moving forward at all, but not as many times when we're modernizing too quickly. So I think, of course, you know, if you're overhauling an entire legislative system, you need to have a backup plan. You need to make sure that, you know, things aren't breaking while you're making changes, but that's never really been a problem or an issue. I think the opposite has been, where we're not taking any risks at all.
Thank you, Ananda. Leisel, would you like to collaborate to this conversation too?
Well, I agree with everything that was said. I definitely think a critical piece that Rocío mentioned was this idea of crisis. The 116th Congress in the United States, it began with the longest government shutdown in history. And then right before it ended, there was an attack on the US Capitol. We also had the pandemic during the 117th Congress. The United States has been hovering on this brink of potential nuclear war. Congress is sort of a crisis response institution in many ways, but at the same time, it did suffer through some unprecedented global crises between 2019 and currently. The pandemic, of course, impacted a ton of different parliaments. During our scoping session for the Congressional Digital Service, we talked to a number of different parliaments and legislatures. And obviously, the United States is not a parliament, but legislative bodies across the world were trying to adjust to this process. Technology played a critical role. And everyone we spoke with really did try to balance the traditions and the needs of quorum and voting in person and things that people need to keep continuity of an institution, because institutionalism in many ways is important. But then they were also trying to recognize we couldn't function like that anymore. And I think in every crisis, what I've seen is that there is always a pain point or a breaking point that surfaces that whether it's the United States Congress or another legislative body comes to solve. And that can be everything from issues that we dealt with withdrawing from Afghanistan, to how we're responding to Ukraine, to how we're responding to crises all over the world, to the pandemic. Legislatures want to solve problems. They want to approach a problem, but improve upon it. But they often have to do it under intense circumstances. It has to be really quickly done really quickly. And I think sometimes when one key element of maintaining continuity is to not forget what happened during that crisis. We adapted really quickly in the US Congress. It seemed like offices worked from home really quickly. There were a number of changes that were made, but often those lessons get forgotten because you have to move to the next crisis. But one thing I wanted to highlight is this approach to, like, a hybrid approach to change. I think the e-hopper, so in the United States Congress and the House, there's a box on the floor of the House of Representatives a wooden box, and members would submit legislation into that box. And we actually heard a Bússola Tech debate with a bunch of different parliaments and legislative bodies during the pandemic. And a big accomplishment of the House of Representatives is that we created an e-hopper, which would be basically an email account. And we got rid of the wooden box on the floor of the House of Representatives, not totally rid of it, but it was no longer the thing that was used to submit legislation, which is crazy to think that that's exactly how we were still doing it. But on the other hand, the front end became this email inbox, which was sort of familiar, but the back end, actually, they're still printing out legislation, taking it over to GPO, the government printing office. There were still some very traditional elements on the back end of that process, which I found really interesting. It has since been iterated upon. There's a really innovative group that's working on it. They're super smart, really talented. So they're constantly building new tools and creating new ways of addressing or responding to crises, but also ensuring that the United States Congress can keep working. But I think that's one example where you had folks who were still trying to make it work while adjusting kind of behind the scenes to something new while keeping it sort of familiar on the front end for folks. So I think the value of hybrid approaches to change is really important. And I think that's something everyone should encourage.
Thank you, Leisel. So also, Ananda, you and Ananda were talking, and I remembered advice that a colleague from the Parliament of Israel told me, that it is keep it simple sometimes. Sometimes when we are trying to innovate, we try to think on complex things first, but sometimes we have to get a step back and try to think how to keep some innovation simple for everyone, for MPs, for the other colleagues, and so on. So thank you for all your contributions for this question. And unhappily, we are moving to our last question, because for me, we can keep answering questions like that, because we know that managing change is not easy, as you all mentioned. It's about time, it's about creativity, it's about communication, it's about managing expectations, your expectations and the expectations of the team of the House. But we are going to the last question right now, and I would like to start with Yaso. As times change and technology advances, modernizing the legislative branch becomes crucial to maintain their resilience and keep its function, as, for example, Leisel commented. However, the modernization of processes is often challenging due to the potential barriers. In this context, it's essential to identify best practices that could be applied to the modernization of the legislative branch and understand the potential obstacles to their implementation. So, Yaso, what would you list as best practice that could be applied to the modernization strategy of the legislative branch? And what are the potential challenges to their implementation?
Thank you, Sarah. I think one of the key things that we can do right to help make the change easier is having really good discovery process, meaning a gap analysis. I come back to the example that I related a question earlier about being in the session when my project manager would hold these sessions, and just seeing the collaboration in the room happen, which is a result of building a good relationship, building the good bond, seeing how the information flows. So I think I seem to repeat people and good relationships quite a bit, because it does make the job easier. So that's one of my things that I would like to offer, is establishing and building that good relationship. and support. Make sure there is support along the way, because it is change. There's gap, there's the implementation, there's go live, and there is support after, as people adopt change, whether it's within the business or knowing that they can get timely support when things are not going to what they thought it would be. I think that makes a lot of difference. It makes people feel supported and will help make the next round of change easier. Now, if I come to challenges, it is discord, because it is change. It's a very natural trajectory. And how you can manage discord is, again, by doing the basic decent human things like building a good relationship, having that communication, so that it's easy for us to work through these things. Now, I will add that I feel like my experience is very much quite on this side of the fence. So I've only transacted with immediate business users, people who are already on board for the change. So I will say, again, it's quite eye-opening to have a glimpse into what it's like down the track, because it's quite different for you. You're trying to convince people that, hey, get here. And we are working with people already. Yes, let's do it. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. I remember that in user experience matters and classes, we always talk about support, because that way the user feel confident to take action and continue the action. So it's an interesting thing that you mentioned, and to generate this feeling of confidence, for example, for the user, for the team, and so on. So thank you for your collaboration for this question. Ananda, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, well, I completely agree that, great relationships and a collaborative work environment is really important. I mean, I just think that these changes are more likely to happen, of course, and then also to stick around if everyone is on the same page from the beginning and is working together to come to a consensus, instead of this back and forth fighting where a change happens and then someone undoes it and then they redo it again. It's just not productive. I also think that, changing to this more iterative method for innovation is just so important, because there's so many instances where, we'll enact a really big change, whether that's entirely changing committee structures in the House to overhauling our payroll system. I mean, either direction you go, we'll make this change and then we'll leave it for 20 years and then we'll be like, oh shoot, it's been 20 years, we need to change it again. So, just making sure that we're always going back to these systems and continually improving them. And as soon as you make a major change, to be questioning whether it was the right thing to do, and is it working, and are there additional changes you need to make right in the aftermath. I think that's very important. And then finally, this is very particular to, the US Congress, but I think a huge best practice would be if we could get the House and the Senate to work on these modernization initiatives together. And I'm thrilled that Leisel's over there and I can work with her now. And it's great when you have partners on the other side, but I think, at the higher up level, if we would have more consensus that modernization is not just important, but something that should be done in a bicameral fashion, that would certainly make a lot of this work easier.
Thank you, Ananda. So Leisel would like to comment on that.
Yes, thank you. I appreciated the other answers. I just want to quickly emphasize that the reason these issues, the modernization and innovation, are so important are because they enable Congress. I know it's been said, but the US Congress to respond better to the needs of the American people. That's the point of it. They're operating in isolation. It's really to make the US Congress more responsive to the needs of the American people, who often feel very alienated from their own institutions. But I would say in terms of the best practices, the first thing, as was noted earlier, doing a gap assessment or just doing your research. Get your research done first and make sure you have a really good understanding of what the problem is and what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Secondly, I would test your assumptions and thoroughly interrogate your theory of the case. So if you think you know what the problem is, continue to interrogate it, continue to ask questions about your assumptions and about the status quo and the way it has been addressed in the past. I think one of the most critical elements of leadership or anyone trying to operate in an innovative space is to ask questions and to be curious. And then I would also say build the right team, as we've discussed. As was mentioned, the diverse teams element is really, really important, not just in terms of your all types of diversity, your socioeconomic background, geopolitical background, wherever you exist, it should all be very, very diverse, because there's plenty of research to suggest that diverse teams promote creativity and innovation. And I think that's a really important point, and appreciate that it was made. The other best practice, I think, and this is one that I can't overemphasize enough, is the interdisciplinary teams. They're really, really important. And I think bringing folks who have a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different skills is essential. I was really lucky to help build this pilot fellowship, and we brought in a team of experts, and they were all really different and had unique skills. I mean, they worked really well together, and we had this unusual opportunity to be hosted by the Modernization Committee, but they were able to use their unique skills to go into these other offices and build and provide solutions, but they were able to also communicate and collaborate, and they were able to do so using each of their own strengths, and they were all really fantastic. So you should all look them up. They're a fantastic group of folks. And then in terms of the challenges, I would say, to implementing these best practices, one is telling the right story to get people on board. The pandemic did provide a really useful use case for why the status quo wasn't working, and it created a story that made sense that people could relate to. And so we were able to do a lot because of that. Building a coalition of the willing is really difficult. I think another element of the Modernization Committee's success, and the House of Representatives at large, their success has been because there are a lot of coalitions and folks who are championing what they're doing. And this goes, across a ton of different special interest areas. But in relation to modernization, innovation, there was the Fixed Congress cohort. They were really active in applauding when the Congress did something right, and holding them accountable when they maybe weren't living up to the expectations of the American people or the groups that they represented. And then I would also say, being really another challenge is ensuring that you utilize creativity in implementing, because I think sometimes not sometimes, all the time, there is never one way to do anything. And so having the creativity to think of, okay, if that didn't work, why don't we pivot and do that? If that doesn't work, let's try something else. So I think the Congressional Digital Service that Tech Congress piloted was a unique opportunity, because it was a nonprofit that built this team that was hosted by another committee, and it just created a model. What we're not saying is perfect, but it was something for the Congress to consider. I think there's been several other models that have been utilized in the past as well, but trying out different models, seeing how they work, and then having the creativity and ideation to say, maybe that didn't work well and we should move to something else, is a really key challenge, but also opportunity for implementing some of these best practices I noted.
Thank you, Leisel. Rocío would like to comment on that.
Of course. Returning to time, I will have a Friday morning once a month for brainstorming sessions with MPs and staff, and then taking the idea to other interest groups with participative methodology. Very important, a commitment, people in charge, a commitment expert that can follow all the commitments, so it's not forgotten. Also, we saw training and support. I remember the pandemic that some MPs didn't know how to shut off their microphone, I guess, or their video, and we have some memes in the networks because of that. And in Chile, they have a training staff and a support staff for all this modernization. Another example, like I told you, we wanted to be paperless, and some MPs have tablets, but not everyone felt comfortable with the tablets. So we need different responses to the same problem. So it's something to take into account. And also, when we come with an idea, the first question is, another legislative power is doing it. So international experience is sometimes the key to open for innovation. As I said, the wheel is already invented. We just have to modify to our reality. Finally, having political and staff champions of change to help us work with MPs and also with staff. And well, the challenges, time and money.
Thank you, Rocío. I totally understand you, especially about time and morning. So before we go to the final considerations, I would like to invite you all to smile, because we will take a screenshot just to register this special moment. So when I say free, I would like you to smile to our photo today. So 1, 2, 3, and we can back to our debate. Thank you. Beforehand, I would like to thank you again for your time today, for your presence, for sharing these experiences. I feel glad to as a Bússola representative, to help to collaborate in this debate, and also to promote this kind of collaboration between different countries. So once more, thank you. And I would like to have this kind of conversation again and again and again in different thematics, as open data, also in process and change. So now we are going to our final considerations, and I would like to start again in alphabetical order, starting with Ananda, please.
Sure. No, I just want to say thank you again for having me. Really excited to be here. This has been a really great discussion. I think that having these opportunities to learn from each other are really important. I'm still meeting a lot of people from this community in DC and across the world who I've never interacted with before. So the more opportunities we have to learn from each other, the better. So thank you again.
Thank you. Leisel would like to make your final considerations.
Yes, I also would just like to say thank you. I really appreciate you hosting this and learning from all of you and hearing about your experiences. It's been a pleasure. And I would also just like to encourage those, if there's our folks who are listening who are interested in this space and really haven't done anything in it, to really explore it. It's I went most of my career not being aware of this community or this type of work. And because of a crisis, I was pulled into it. And I think it's been incredibly valuable and exciting. And so I would encourage anyone who is interested to get involved in their civic technology organizations in their own country or in the United States, or reach out to any of us if you want help navigating the space. But I think it's really important because I know it's been said many, many times, but government is all of us and those who show up. And we are really fortunate, at least in the United States, to live in a democratic state where participation is possible. And so I hope all of you will take advantage of that. And yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Thank you. Rocío would like to do your final comments.
Well, thank you. I think we have this illusion that everything is calm again, but we have climate change, new pandemics are coming, natural disaster, war disasters, protests are lurking. And I feel some of the many legislative powers are returning to their comfortable traditions, and they are forgetting what we learn with this pandemic. So we have to think about hybrid work. With hybrid work, now that we are commemorating the International Women's Day, it will facilitate to have more women PMs and supervisors in our congresses, and also for men to correctly do their co-responsibility role. So I think that's very important. And I believe that we also have some things pending, like the security of the security of the infrastructure, to protect private data. If we use open source or private source, we have so many challenges, and I really appreciate that the work of Legistech and their partners are helping us to be to know all this that's coming to us, and to continue working to give some answers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rocío. Yaso would like to do your final comments.
Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't help smiling, Rocío, when you said something about women doing things together, because most of the projects, I look after 2 or 3 accounts with the company, and the majority of our project managers are women, and boy, do we get things done. So yes, it's also been eye-opening really to hear about what it's like down the track, as you know, because I'm here and you're there trying to bring people along for the change. It's made me think, it's made me have an appreciation for what John does and what leadership on Parliament, you know, the people who say yes to the change. And yeah, I want to go back to my team and share some of these insights that I've heard here. So thank you. It's been lovely.
Perfect. Yeah. So just before the end of this debate, I would like to comment that we'll have a next conference in April 13th and 14th. It will be in person in Brasilia. So if you would too, I totally welcome you to Brazil. It will be a pleasure to meet you all in person. I think Rocío is coming to Brazil, if I'm not wrong. So you are all invited to our conference in Brazil. And once again, thank you for your participation. And again, I would like to share our strategic partners' words. So it was a pleasure to be here with you all and to share experience. As you mentioned, to be here, to be today amongst incredible women like you, it's totally grateful, it's totally inspiring. So my day today will be complete in my opinion. So thank you again.